Welcome back to Lessons from the Front and this short exploration of the Hago Type 95 light tank that was in Japanese service from the mid-1930s through to the end of the Second World War. I first came across the Hago whilst on holiday in Malaysia in the small town of Port Dickson, where I was visiting the Army Museum, and much to my surprise, I came across the Hago resting quietly on a back corridor of the museum, and I instantly took a liking to this characterful tank. When I heard that the National Museum of Singapore had a Hago on display, I invited my wargaming buddy Nabil to join me in a visit to the museum. So Nabil and I have come to the Singapore National Museum. What are we going to try and see?
We're going to try and see one of the Hago tanks inside the museum, and we'll probably talk a bit more about the tank itself, during the war, some of the stats as well, yeah.
By the way, Nabil, did you know that that tank is a replica?
No way, it's way too small, right?
Dude, I'm not talking about this one. I'm talking about the one that's inside the museum.
I totally have no idea.
Yeah. They actually, it was built for the series Pacific.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And used by Spielberg and Hanks, you know?
I did not know that.
Should we go inside and touch it?
Yeah, let's take a look.
Yeah, man. As Nabil and I stood before the Hago tank in that dimly lit room, we felt a rush of history wash over us. Its compact, rugged design spoke of resilience, a stark reminder of the challenges faced during wartime. The faded paint and worn edges whispered stories of its past to us. Please do forgive the dim light. We hope that we can now share some of the statistics and interesting points about this vehicle.
So this is the Hago tank, one of the replicas here at the museum. The Hago tank had a crew of 3, basically a commander, a driver and a machine gunner. The commander will be situated up there on the turret. The machine gunner will be here operating the 7.7mm machine gun, and the driver will be situated there driving the tank along.
Its main armour was a 37mm Type 94 anti-tank gun. And it also came armed with a forward-facing hull-mounted 7.7mm machine gun. And what's interesting is that the turret came equipped with an additional 7.7mm machine gun, which gave the commander of the tank an option of either the main gun or the machine gun. He could just swivel the turret around depending which weapon he wanted to use. And in bolt action, this is represented by the fact that you can either fire the main gun or the rear-mounted machine gun, but not both in the same turn. Furthermore, in bolt action, a special rule for the Hago tank is that it's a one-man turret. So in real life, the commander of the tank was both the commander, the gunner, and loader. And if you think about it, squeezing all those roles into one human made it very difficult for the commander to do more than one thing at once, obviously. So to represent this in bolt action, it's always necessary for you to take an order test when issuing an advance order for your Hago tank, even if the tank hasn't been pinned. That low velocity light anti-tank gun, the 37mm of the Hago's main weapon, counts as a light anti-tank gun in bolt action. So it only has a penetration rating of a +3 instead of the usual +4. It's not a great weapon, but on the other hand, it's a fairly cheap tank to put on the table, costing only 108 points if you want to field a veteran Hago light tank. In bolt action, the damage value of the Hago is a 7+ armored carrier, but let's see how that armor fared in real life. So let's go across to Tom. He's in the UK. He's at what was once known as the Bovington Tank Museum. And let's hear what he has to say about the Hago tank that's on display there.
So here we have the Japanese Hago tank. Basically, Japanese tanks were mostly light tanks, what they were. Japan hadn't really sort of thought about entering the main conflict of World War II. They were mainly basically about taking taking more territory. So things like the Chinese, who had very little in the way of tanks and armoured vehicles, and so the Japanese didn't really build a vast amount of tanks. What they had was basically lightly armoured. So this has got 12mm of armour, which means it can be penetrated by anti-tank rifles, let alone anti-tank guns. It's got a 37mm anti-tank gun, which by the time Japan entered the war mainly, it was effectively outclassed by most of the tanks, considering that most American and British tanks had a considerably bigger gun on them. But what they made up for is the fact that they were great at getting through very dense terrain, very dense jungle, because they were so light, they were so small. They weren't great for the crew because they had little to no comfort at all. Little to no arm protection. The turret could actually be lifted off by 2 men. It was that light if necessary. But it provided Japan with some armoured support. Japan was primarily an infantry army. They fought on their feet mainly. They didn't rely on their tanks and vehicles.
Thank you, Tom. That was really interesting. And it was nice to see the Hago up close at the Tank Museum in Bovington. I believe the Hago tank had an operational range of 209 kilometers and a top speed on roads of 45 kilometers per hour. Let's head back to Singapore and to Nabil. Nabil, tell us a bit about the suspension of the Hago.
The suspension system, it has a driving sprocket here. It has 2 bogie wheels there, which utilizes the bell crank suspension system. It has a spring that runs across the 2 sets of bogie wheels.
Okay, it's quite dark out here, guys.
Yeah. Then at the back here, this is the guide wheel in itself. Interestingly enough, this is actually a vulnerability of the tank where it could be taken out by rifle fire. For propulsion, the tank uses a 6-cylinder 14.4 litre diesel engine, which produces about 120 horsepower.
Yeah, what's quite interesting as well, Nabil, is that the engine could be repaired from within the tank.
Yeah.
So it had a door inside the cabin, and then they could enter through that door, get access to the engine and repair it. So what size engine did you say it was?
14.4 litre 6-cylinder diesel engine.
Okay, that's cool. Seeing as we're at the rear of the Hago tank, let's quickly shoot back to the UK, Bovington, where Tom's got something interesting to share with us.
So we're here behind the Japanese Hago, and one of the quirky and interesting features was developed during the Japanese campaign in China. So Chinese anti-tank teams would wait for the tank to go past, would then go and knock on the turret top, pretending to be a Japanese soldier wanting assistance. The tank commander would open his hatch to see what was going on, and they would throw grenades in, taking out the tank. So what the Japanese did was they put a false bolt in, and this bolt was actually a buzzer for inside the tank. So the Japanese soldier could come up behind the tank and get the tank commander's attention. Now, the Chinese obviously didn't realise about this straight away, so it gave the Japanese an advantage in that their tank commanders knew who was friend from foe. So the Japanese soldier could get the tank commander's attention, and the tank commander wouldn't get a grenade thrown in his turret.
Thank you, Tom. That was interesting information about the buzzer at the back of the Hago. I was just sharing this with the curator at the museum, and neither them nor Nabil or I had any idea about this. So we've learned something new. That was great. Thank you. And also thank you, Tom, for joining us here at Lessons from the Front. It was great to have you on the channel, and hope to have you again soon. As for the rest of you, thank you so much for watching. I trust that you enjoyed the contents of this short video and also learned something new for your games and bolt action. It's quite an interesting tank, this, isn't it? For those of you who have subscribed already, I really do appreciate your support, and I love the comments that come onto at the bottom here below after the video. I do read them all and I do respond. For those of you who haven't yet subscribed, please do so, and remember to smash the like button. And in the meantime, happy gaming!